The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his red tunic for what he thought would be another routine day. The year was 1982, and the 28-year-old Welsh guardsman had been protecting the royal family for nearly 6 years. His polished boots reflected the early light as he marched toward his post, unaware that this particular July morning would test every ounce of his training and courage. Marcus had joined the Welsh Guards straight from his hometown of Swansea, drawn by the honor and tradition of serving the crown. His father had been a coal miner, and his mother worked as a seamstress, but Marcus had always dreamed of something greater. The rigorous training at the Infantry Training Center had molded him into the perfect soldier, disciplined, alert, and utterly devoted to his duty. The palace grounds were already bustling with activity. Tourists gathered outside the gates, cameras ready to capture the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Inside the palace walls, housekeeping staff moved quietly through the corridors, preparing for another day of royal engagements. The Queen was scheduled to meet with several dignitaries that afternoon, and security was particularly tight. Marcus took his position at the entrance to the private apartments, his ceremonial rifle held at the perfect angle. He had performed this duty hundreds of times before, but he never allowed himself to become complacent. Every face that passed was scrutinized, every movement analyzed for potential threats. The weight of protecting the sovereign was not lost on him. As the morning progressed, Marcus noticed something unusual. A maintenance worker had been lingering near the east wing for longer than normal, supposedly checking electrical systems. The man wore the proper identification badge and uniform, but something about his behavior triggered Marcus's instincts. The worker kept glancing toward the royal apartments and seemed nervous, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cool morning air. Marcus discreetly alerted his colleague, Corporal James Mitchell, through their concealed communication system. James, a veteran of the Falklands War who had joined the Grenadier Guards after his service, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Both men had been trained to spot potential threats, and their combined experience told them something was wrong. The maintenance worker suddenly moved with purpose toward a service entrance that provided direct access to the Queen's private quarters. Marcus made a split-second decision that would define his career. Breaking from his ceremonial post, a serious breach of protocol under normal circumstances, he began following the suspect while James called for backup. The corridors of Buckingham Palace seemed to stretch endlessly as Marcus pursued the intruder. His heavy ceremonial uniform was not designed for running, but his physical conditioning kept him moving. The sound of his boots on the marble floors echoed through the halls, and he could hear the maintenance worker picking up his pace ahead. As they moved deeper into the palace, Marcus realized the man knew exactly where he was going. This was not a random intruder but someone with detailed knowledge of the building's layout. The implications were terrifying. If this person had inside information, the security breach could be far more serious than initially thought. The chase led through the servants' quarters and up a narrow staircase that Marcus had rarely used during his service. The maintenance worker was moving toward the Queen's private study, where Her Majesty often spent her mornings reviewing state papers and correspondence. The thought of an armed intruder reaching the sovereign sent adrenaline coursing through Marcus's veins. At the top of the staircase, the maintenance worker suddenly turned and Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. The man was carrying what appeared to be a concealed weapon, not the tools of a maintenance worker, but something far more sinister. The morning light streaming through a nearby window glinted off metal, and Marcus knew he was facing a potential assassin. The training kicked in automatically. Marcus had spent countless hours preparing for exactly this scenario, though he had always hoped he would never have to use those skills in reality. His ceremonial rifle was not loaded, palace protocol required ammunition to be secured separately, but his physical training and combat experience would have to be enough. The maintenance worker spun around, realizing he had been discovered. For a moment, the two men stared at each other in the elegant hallway lined with portraits of past monarchs. The intruder's eyes were cold and determined, showing none of the fear Marcus might have expected. This was clearly a professional, someone who had planned this operation carefully and was prepared to see it through to the end. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most dramatic confrontations in the history of royal protection. The maintenance worker lunged forward with his concealed weapon, aiming directly at Marcus. The Welsh guardsman's reflexes, honed by years of military training, saved his life as he twisted away from the attack and grabbed the intruder's wrist. The struggle was fierce and silent, both men understanding that any noise might alert the queen to danger or, worse, cause panic throughout the palace. They grappled in the narrow hallway, each trying to gain control of the weapon while maintaining their balance on the polished floor. Marcus could feel his opponent's strength and realized this was not going to be an easy fight. The intruder was skilled in hand-to-hand combat, suggesting military or professional training. His movements were calculated and efficient, designed to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. Marcus found himself fighting not just for his own life, but for the safety of the sovereign he had sworn to protect. As they continued to struggle, Marcus could hear footsteps approaching from below, hopefully James and the backup security team. But he knew he could not wait for help to arrive. Every second the intruder remained free was another moment of danger for the royal family. The fight moved along the hallway, with both men using the walls and furniture as leverage. A small table was knocked over, sending a valuable vase crashing to the floor. The sound echoed through the corridor, and Marcus knew it would not be long before others came to investigate. With a surge of determination fueled by his oath of service, Marcus managed to gain the upper hand. Using a combat technique learned during his basic training, he twisted the intruder's arm behind his back and slammed him against the wall. The weapon clattered to the floor, spinning away from both men. But the intruder was not finished. With a desperate move, he broke free from Marcus's grip and dove for the fallen weapon. Marcus lunged after him, and the two men crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and determination. The polished marble was unforgiving, and both combatants felt the impact as they hit the ground. The sound of running footsteps grew louder, and Marcus could hear James shouting orders to the approaching security team. Help was coming, but the immediate danger was far from over. The intruder was still fighting with the desperation of a cornered animal, and Marcus knew that even wounded, he remained extremely dangerous. As the struggle continued on the palace floor, Marcus thought of his oath to protect the crown with his life. This was the moment that oath would be tested. The morning that had started so routinely had become a life-or-death battle in the very heart of the British monarchy's home. The next few minutes would determine not only his fate, but potentially the safety of the Queen herself. The reinforcements arrived just as Marcus managed to pin the intruder to the floor. Corporal James Mitchell burst through the doorway first, his face flushed from running through the palace corridors. Behind him came Detective Inspector Sarah Collins from the Metropolitan Police's Royalty and Diplomatic Protection Department, her hand already reaching for her sidearm. The sight that greeted them would remain etched in their memories forever. Marcus was breathing heavily, his ceremonial uniform torn and disheveled from the struggle. Beneath him, the fake maintenance worker continued to resist, his face twisted with rage and determination. The concealed weapon, revealed now to be a modified pistol with a silencer, lay several feet away, its deadly purpose clear to everyone in the room. Detective Inspector Collins immediately took control of the situation. A veteran of 15 years in protection services, she had worked her way up through the ranks of Scotland Yard to become one of the most respected officers in royal security. Her calm voice cut through the tension as she directed the arrest procedures while Marcus finally allowed himself to step back from the subdued intruder. The man they had captured was not talking. Even as they searched him and found additional weapons concealed in his maintenance uniform, he maintained a stubborn silence. His identification papers appeared genuine at first glance, but closer inspection revealed sophisticated forgeries that suggested backing from a well-funded organization. This was no lone wolf attack, but part of something much larger and more sinister. Within minutes, the palace was in controlled lockdown. The Queen, who had been reviewing her morning correspondence in her private study just rooms away from where the confrontation had taken place, was immediately moved to a secure location. She displayed the same calm dignity that had characterized her entire reign, asking only whether anyone had been injured and expressing her gratitude to Marcus for his quick thinking and courage. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of the threat they had faced. The intruder was identified as Viktor Petrov, a former Soviet Special Forces operative who had been recruited by an international terrorist organization. Intelligence services later discovered that this had been the first phase of a coordinated attack plan to coincide with several high-profile royal engagements throughout the summer. Marcus found himself at the center of a whirlwind of debriefings and interviews. Security officials from multiple agencies wanted to understand exactly how he had identified the threat and what had prompted his decision to break protocol. His actions had likely prevented an assassination attempt, but they had also highlighted serious vulnerabilities in the palace's security systems. The psychological impact of the confrontation began to manifest in the days following the incident. Marcus had trained for such scenarios, but the reality of facing a professional killer in hand-to-hand combat was different from any training exercise. He found himself replaying the moment when he first spotted the suspicious maintenance worker, wondering what might have happened if his instincts had been wrong or if he had hesitated for even a moment longer. Sleep became elusive as Marcus struggled with the weight of what had occurred. The palace medical staff provided counseling services, but the Welsh guardsman found it difficult to process the fact that his split-second decision had potentially saved the life of the sovereign. The responsibility he had always taken seriously now felt almost overwhelming in its magnitude. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus was summoned to a private audience with the Queen. He had never spoken directly with Her Majesty before, and the prospect filled him with both honor and nervousness. The private drawing room where they met was intimate and comfortable, far from the formal settings he had always associated with royal encounters. The Queen's words were simple but profound. She thanked Marcus not just for his bravery, but for his dedication to duty and his willingness to act when action was needed. She spoke about the importance of having guardsmen who understood that their role went beyond ceremony and tradition, that they were the last line of defense for the monarchy itself. During their conversation, the Queen revealed something that surprised Marcus. She had been aware of his presence in the corridor outside her study on many previous occasions and had always felt secure knowing he was there. His vigilance and professionalism had not gone unnoticed, even during the routine days when nothing unusual occurred. The recognition that followed was both public and private. Marcus received the Queen's Gallantry Medal in a ceremony that drew international attention, but the personal satisfaction came from knowing he had fulfilled his oath of service when it mattered most. The other guardsmen looked at him with a mixture of respect and understanding. They all knew that any of them might face a similar test someday. The security reforms implemented after the incident were comprehensive and far-reaching. New background check procedures were established for all palace staff, including maintenance workers and contractors. The communication systems used by the royal protection officers were upgraded, and additional training scenarios were developed to prepare guards for similar situations. Marcus found himself involved in training the next generation of royal guards, sharing his experience and insights with recruits who hung on his every word. He emphasized not just the physical aspects of protection work, but the mental awareness and intuitive skills that had allowed him to identify the threat before it was too late. The incident also strengthened the bond between the various protection units. The cooperation between Marcus, James, and Detective Inspector Collins had been seamless despite coming from different branches of the security apparatus. This coordination became a model for future operations and helped break down some of the traditional barriers between military and police protection services. As months passed, Marcus began to understand the broader implications of what had occurred that July morning. Intelligence investigations had uncovered a network of similar planned attacks against royal families and government officials across Europe. His actions had not only protected the British monarchy but had helped expose and disrupt an international terrorist operation. The psychological support continued, and Marcus learned to cope with what military psychologists called critical incident stress. The palace ensured that all guards received regular mental health assessments and support, recognizing that the demands of royal protection could take a toll that was not always visible on the surface. The relationship between Marcus and his fellow guardsmen evolved after the incident. While there was certainly pride in his actions, there was also an understanding that he had simply done what any of them would have done in the same circumstances. This mutual respect and shared commitment to duty became an even stronger foundation for the unit's effectiveness. Detective Inspector Collins became a regular presence at the palace in the months following the incident, working closely with military personnel to develop improved threat assessment procedures. Her professional relationship with Marcus grew into a mutual respect based on their shared experience of that dramatic morning. The media attention gradually subsided, but the impact of the incident continued to resonate throughout the Royal Protection Services. Marcus's quick thinking and decisive action had become a case study in training programs, and his name was quietly added to the honor rolls of guardsmen who had gone above and beyond in service to the crown. The fake maintenance workers' true identity and motivations were eventually fully uncovered through international intelligence cooperation. Viktor Petrov had been part of a cell that had spent months studying the palace's routines and identifying weaknesses in security protocols. His capture had effectively shut down years of planning and preparation by hostile foreign actors. Marcus often reflected on the random nature of the assignment that had placed him at the right location on that particular morning. A different rotation schedule, a slight change in duties, or even a few minutes' difference in timing could have resulted in a completely different outcome. The weight of this responsibility continued to influence his approach to every subsequent day of service. 2 years after Marcus Thompson's heroic intervention, another crisis would test the limits of royal protection in ways no one could have anticipated. Captain Elizabeth Hartwell of the Scots Guards found herself commanding the overnight security detail at Windsor Castle on a cold November evening in 1984. The 32-year-old officer from Edinburgh had earned her position through exceptional service and an unwavering commitment to excellence that had impressed her superiors throughout her military career. Elizabeth came from a military family with deep roots in Scottish tradition. Her grandfather had served with distinction in World War II, and her father had been a career officer in the Royal Navy. She had broken new ground as one of the first women to serve in a senior command role within the Royal Protection Services, facing skepticism and challenges that her male colleagues never encountered. Her determination to prove herself had made her one of the most respected officers in the entire system. The evening began routinely enough, with Elizabeth conducting her standard briefing for the night shift guards. The Queen was in residence at Windsor, enjoying the quieter atmosphere of the castle after a busy week of state functions in London. The autumn weather had been particularly harsh, with strong winds and heavy rain creating challenging conditions for the external patrols. Windsor Castle, with its ancient walls and sprawling grounds, presented unique security challenges compared to the more controlled environment of Buckingham Palace. The sheer size of the property, combined with its historical architecture, created numerous potential vulnerabilities that required constant vigilance. Elizabeth had spent months studying every entrance, every hiding place, and every possible approach route that could be used by potential intruders. At approximately 11:30 that night, the first indication of trouble came from Guardsman Robert Fraser, who was patrolling the North Terrace. His radio crackled to life with an urgent whisper. He had spotted movement in the gardens that did not match any authorized patrol patterns. Elizabeth immediately moved to the command center, where she could coordinate the response and monitor all communication channels simultaneously. The castle's sophisticated alarm systems remained silent, suggesting that whoever was moving through the grounds had either avoided the sensors or possessed detailed knowledge of their locations. This was eerily similar to the intelligence gathered from the Buckingham Palace incident 2 years earlier, and Elizabeth felt a chill of recognition as she realized they might be facing another professionally planned infiltration. Within minutes, reports were coming in from multiple positions around the castle perimeter. At least 3 separate intruders had been spotted moving with military precision toward different sections of the main building. Their coordination and timing suggested extensive reconnaissance and planning, indicating this was not a random break-in but a sophisticated operation with specific objectives. Elizabeth made the immediate decision to implement full lockdown procedures while simultaneously alerting the Queen's personal protection officers. The sovereign was moved to the most secure section of the castle while additional armed response teams were summoned from their standby positions. The ancient walls of Windsor were about to witness a confrontation between tradition and modern threats. The intruders had chosen their timing well, taking advantage of the severe weather that had reduced visibility and created natural cover for their approach. The howling wind masked sounds that might otherwise have been detected, and the heavy rain had driven most external patrols to seek temporary shelter. Only the dedication and alertness of Guardsman Fraser had prevented a complete surprise attack. As Elizabeth coordinated the response from the command center, she found herself drawing on every aspect of her military training and leadership experience. The situation was fluid and dangerous, with multiple unknowns that could shift the balance at any moment. Her calm voice on the radio became an anchor of stability for the guards who were moving into position throughout the castle grounds. The first confrontation occurred near the Queen's Tower, where Sergeant David Mackenzie of the Scots Guards encountered one of the intruders attempting to scale the exterior wall. The fight was brief but intense, with Mackenzie using his combat training to subdue an opponent who was clearly skilled in close-quarters combat. The intruder's equipment included sophisticated climbing gear and what appeared to be military-grade night vision equipment. The second intruder was spotted attempting to access the castle through the kitchen service areas, where the security was traditionally lighter due to the constant movement of staff and deliveries. Lance Corporal Maria Santos, one of the newer additions to the guard detail, found herself face-to-face with an armed infiltrator who had already disabled 2 electronic locks using advanced bypassing equipment. Santos, despite having only 18 months of experience with the Royal Guards, responded with the same courage and professionalism that had defined the service for generations. Her background as a former military police officer proved invaluable as she engaged the intruder in a running battle through the castle's service corridors, eventually trapping him in a dead-end passage near the old wine cellars. The third intruder presented the most serious threat, having successfully penetrated the castle's main defenses and reaching the residential wing where the royal family's private quarters were located. This infiltrator had somehow obtained detailed floor plans and security information, allowing him to navigate directly toward his target while avoiding most of the guard positions. Elizabeth herself took personal command of the pursuit through the castle's labyrinthine interior. Her intimate knowledge of Windsor's layout, gained through months of security planning and preparation, proved crucial as she anticipated the intruder's route and positioned her forces to intercept him before he could reach the royal apartments. The chase through Windsor Castle's ancient corridors was unlike anything in Elizabeth's experience. The intruder moved with the confidence of someone who had studied every detail of the building's architecture, but Elizabeth had the advantage of knowing not just the layout but also the tactical implications of each corridor and chamber. Her strategic thinking allowed her to outmaneuver an opponent who had clearly underestimated the capabilities of the Royal Protection Forces. The confrontation came to a climax in the Grand Reception Room, where centuries of royal history looked down from oil paintings and tapestries as modern warfare played out among priceless artifacts. The intruder had been cornered, but he was far from defeated. His training and equipment made him a formidable opponent, even when faced with Elizabeth's tactical advantages. The fight that ensued tested every aspect of Elizabeth's military training and physical conditioning. Her opponent was larger and stronger, but she had the advantage of fighting on familiar ground and the motivation of protecting her sovereign. The ornate furniture and delicate artwork created both obstacles and opportunities as the two combatants struggled for control. Elizabeth's leadership throughout the crisis became legendary among her fellow officers. She had maintained situational awareness across multiple simultaneous confrontations while personally engaging the most dangerous threat. Her calm decision-making under extreme pressure had prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. The investigation that followed revealed the 3 intruders to be part of the same international network that had attempted the Buckingham Palace attack 2 years earlier. Their equipment and training indicated state-level backing, and their detailed knowledge of castle security suggested the involvement of inside sources or extensive surveillance operations. The successful defense of Windsor Castle on that November night became a turning point in royal protection services. Elizabeth's leadership had demonstrated that the traditional values of courage and duty could be combined with modern tactical thinking to create an effective defense against sophisticated threats. Her example inspired a new generation of officers who understood that protecting the monarchy required both respect for tradition and adaptation to contemporary challenges. The Queen's response to the incident was characteristically gracious and thoughtful. In a private meeting with Elizabeth the following week, she expressed her gratitude not just for the successful defense of the castle, but for the way it had been conducted with minimal disruption to the castle's staff and operations. The sovereign understood better than anyone that effective protection required not just stopping threats, but maintaining the normal functioning of royal duties and responsibilities. The psychological impact on Elizabeth and her team was significant, but different from what Marcus Thompson had experienced at Buckingham Palace. The Windsor incident had involved multiple simultaneous threats and required sustained tactical thinking rather than split-second reaction. The complexity of coordinating a multi-point defense while personally engaging in combat had pushed Elizabeth's capabilities to their absolute limits. The recognition that followed acknowledged not just individual courage but team coordination and leadership under pressure. Elizabeth received the Distinguished Service Order, becoming one of the youngest female officers ever to receive this honor. More importantly, her tactical innovations and leadership methods became standard training for all Royal Protection Units. The summer of 1987 brought an entirely different kind of challenge to the Royal Protection Services, one that would test not just physical courage but diplomatic skills and cultural sensitivity. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien of the Irish Guards found himself assigned to protect Prince Charles during a controversial state visit to Ireland, the first such visit by a senior royal in decades. The political tensions surrounding this historic trip created security challenges unlike anything the Guards had previously encountered. Michael O'Brien's selection for this assignment was no accident. Born in Belfast but raised in London after his family fled the Troubles, he understood the complex emotions and dangerous undercurrents that the prince's visit would inevitably stir up. His background gave him insights that purely English guards might lack, while his unwavering loyalty to the crown had been proven through 8 years of distinguished service with the Irish Guards. The advanced security preparations for the visit had taken months and involved cooperation between British security services, the Irish government, and local police forces on both sides of the border. Intelligence reports indicated numerous threats from various paramilitary groups who saw the royal visit as either an opportunity to make a political statement or a target for more violent action. The first day of the visit proceeded with careful precision, every movement choreographed and every potential risk assessed and mitigated. Michael found himself constantly scanning crowds, evaluating faces, and maintaining communication with a network of security personnel that stretched across Dublin and beyond. The weight of protecting a member of the royal family in such a politically charged environment was unlike anything he had experienced during his previous assignments. The prince himself was well aware of the risks but determined to proceed with the diplomatic mission that had been years in the planning. His calm demeanor and genuine interest in meeting the Irish people created additional challenges for security, as spontaneous interactions with crowds were exactly the kind of situations that could not be fully controlled or predicted. The first major incident occurred during a walkabout in Dublin city centre, where crowds had gathered despite heavy rain to catch a glimpse of the visiting prince. Michael noticed a disturbance near the police barriers as a group of protesters attempted to break through the security cordon. What started as shouted slogans quickly escalated into physical confrontation as opposing groups of supporters and protesters clashed in the street. Michael's training kicked in immediately, but this situation required more than just physical intervention. The political sensitivities meant that any heavy-handed response could create an international incident and undermine the diplomatic purpose of the entire visit. His approach had to balance the immediate need to protect the prince with the long-term goals of the peace process. Working closely with Irish police officers, Michael helped establish a buffer zone around the prince while allowing the visit to continue with minimal disruption. His ability to communicate effectively with local law enforcement and his understanding of the cultural dynamics at play proved crucial in defusing a situation that could have escalated dramatically. The real test came 2 days later during a visit to the border region, where the political tensions were most acute and the security risks highest. Intelligence had indicated possible paramilitary activity in the area, but the diplomatic schedule required the prince to visit a community center that had become a symbol of cross-community cooperation. As the royal convoy approached the center, Michael noticed unusual activity among the crowd that had gathered. Several individuals were positioning themselves in ways that suggested coordination rather than random curiosity. His radio communications with the advanced security team revealed similar observations from multiple positions around the venue. The decision to proceed with the visit despite these concerns came from the highest levels of government, reflecting the political importance of showing that royal family members could travel safely throughout Ireland. Michael found himself responsible for implementing security measures that would protect the prince while avoiding any actions that might be interpreted as provocative by the local community. The crowd outside the community center included a mix of genuine well-wishers, curious onlookers, and individuals whose intentions were less clear. Michael's experience in reading crowd dynamics developed through years of ceremonial duties and public appearances, allowed him to identify potential troublemakers while avoiding the appearance of profiling or discrimination. When the prince emerged from his vehicle to begin the walkabout, Michael positioned himself at optimal distance, close enough to respond immediately to any threat, but far enough away to avoid interfering with the diplomatic interactions that were the purpose of the visit. Every step was calculated, every angle of approach considered and prepared for. The attack, when it came, was both sudden and sophisticated. A coordinated group of individuals attempted to rush the prince from multiple directions simultaneously, using the crowd as cover and timing their approach to coincide with a moment when security attention was focused on a separate distraction. Michael found himself facing the most complex threat scenario of his career. His response had to be instantaneous but measured. Too little force and the prince could be seriously injured or killed. Too much force and the diplomatic mission could be destroyed, potentially setting back peace efforts by years. Michael's split-second decision-making drew on every aspect of his training and his deep understanding of the political context. The first attacker was intercepted just yards from the prince, with Michael using defensive techniques that neutralized the threat without causing serious injury. His movements were witnessed by hundreds of people and multiple television cameras, meaning that every action would be scrutinized and analyzed for political implications as well as security effectiveness. The second and third attackers required coordination with Irish police officers who had also recognized the threat and moved to intercept. Michael's ability to work seamlessly with local law enforcement, despite the complex history between British and Irish security forces, demonstrated the professionalism that had made this visit possible in the first place. The entire incident lasted less than 30 seconds, but its implications resonated far beyond that brief moment. Michael's handling of the situation, protecting the prince while showing respect for the local community and avoiding any actions that could be interpreted as heavy-handed or insensitive, became a case study in diplomatic protection work. The aftermath of the incident revealed the true sophistication of the threat they had faced. The attackers were members of a dissident Republican group that had planned the assault for weeks, studying security procedures and timing their approach to exploit what they perceived as weaknesses in the protection arrangements. Their failure to reach their target was due primarily to Michael's alertness and the coordination he had established with local security forces. The prince's reaction to the incident demonstrated why he had insisted on proceeding with the visit despite security concerns. Rather than allowing the attack to derail the diplomatic mission, he expressed concern for the injured attackers and emphasized his continued commitment to dialogue and understanding between the communities. Michael found himself at the center of international media attention as news of the incident spread. His background as an Irishman serving in the British Army, combined with his professional handling of a politically sensitive situation, made him a symbol of the complex relationships that the royal visit was intended to address. The psychological impact of the incident was different from the clear-cut confrontations that other royal guards had faced in previous years. Michael had to deal not just with the physical threat but with the political and cultural dimensions of violence rooted in centuries of conflict. The weight of representing both his service and his heritage while protecting the crown created emotional complexities that required ongoing support and counseling. The success of the overall visit, despite the attempted attack, was seen as a significant step forward in British-Irish relations. Michael's role in ensuring that success while maintaining the dignity and safety of the prince earned him recognition from both governments and helped establish new protocols for royal protection work in politically sensitive environments. The training reforms that followed the Ireland incident focused on cultural sensitivity and diplomatic awareness alongside traditional security skills. Michael became involved in developing these new training programs, sharing his insights about the importance of understanding local contexts when providing protection in international or politically charged situations. The incident also strengthened cooperation between British and Irish security services, with Michael's successful collaboration with local police becoming a model for future joint operations. His ability to build trust and rapport with officers who might have viewed British forces with suspicion demonstrated the importance of personal relationships in effective security work. Years later, Michael would reflect on how the Ireland assignment had challenged every assumption he had made about royal protection work. The traditional model of purely defensive security had to be adapted for situations where the political and diplomatic implications of every action were as important as the immediate physical threat. His success in navigating these complexities helped redefine what it meant to protect the royal family in an increasingly interconnected world. The final test of the decade came during the winter of 1989, when Warrant Officer First Class Catherine Reynolds of the Coldstream Guards found herself facing a crisis that would challenge not only her military skills but her understanding of loyalty, duty, and the very nature of royal service. The 40-year-old veteran had served the crown for nearly 2 decades, rising through the ranks to become one of the most senior non-commissioned officers in the Royal Protection Service. Catherine's path to this position had been marked by exceptional dedication and a series of increasingly challenging assignments. She had begun her military career as a young woman from Yorkshire, drawn by the opportunity to serve something greater than herself. Her methodical approach to duty and her ability to remain calm under pressure had caught the attention of her superiors early in her career, leading to her selection for specialized protection training. The crisis began on a December evening when Catherine was supervising the security arrangements for a private family gathering at Sandringham House, the royal family's country estate in Norfolk. What should have been a routine assignment became complicated when intelligence services intercepted communications suggesting an imminent threat to the royal family from an unexpected source, someone with inside knowledge and authorized access to royal residences. The possibility of an insider threat represented the nightmare scenario that all protection officers feared but rarely discussed openly. The entire security system was built on trust and loyalty, with extensive background checks and ongoing monitoring designed to ensure that those closest to the royal family could be relied upon absolutely. The suggestion that this trust might have been betrayed sent shockwaves through the protection services. Catherine found herself leading an investigation that required her to scrutinize colleagues she had worked alongside for years. The list of individuals with the access and knowledge necessary to pose a credible threat was disturbingly small, including people she considered friends and trusted partners. The weight of suspecting her own teammates created emotional conflicts that her training had never prepared her to handle. The investigation revealed troubling patterns in recent security incidents, including the Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle attacks from earlier in the decade. Analysis suggested that the attackers had possessed inside information about guard rotations, security protocols, and even personal details about individual protection officers. The possibility that these previous incidents had been facilitated by a traitor within their own ranks cast everything in a new and sinister light. Working closely with counterintelligence specialists from MI5, Catherine began the delicate process of identifying the source of the security leaks without alerting potential suspects or compromising ongoing operations. This required her to maintain normal working relationships with colleagues while secretly investigating their activities and backgrounds. The psychological strain of this assignment was unlike anything Catherine had experienced during her military career. She had faced physical danger many times and had always been able to rely on her training and her teammates to overcome any challenge. Now she found herself isolated, unable to trust the very people she had always counted on for support and backup. The breakthrough came when electronic surveillance detected unauthorized communications from within Sandringham House itself. Someone was transmitting detailed information about the royal family's movements and security arrangements to an external contact using sophisticated encryption methods. Catherine realized that the threat was not just imminent but already inside the perimeter. The investigation focused on a small group of individuals who had access to the communication systems and detailed knowledge of the information being transmitted. Catherine found herself examining the backgrounds and recent activities of people she had served alongside for years, looking for any indication of disloyalty or compromise. The discovery that the traitor was Sergeant Major William Hartley, a 25-year veteran of the Grenadier Guards, came as a devastating shock to everyone involved. Hartley had been a respected and trusted member of the Royal Protection Team, with an exemplary service record and no apparent financial or personal motivations for betrayal. His recruitment by hostile foreign intelligence services had been gradual and sophisticated, exploiting personal vulnerabilities that had never been detected by routine security screening. The confrontation with Hartley took place in the secure communications room at Sandringham, where Catherine had arranged to meet him under the pretense of discussing routine security updates. The weight of evidence against him was overwhelming, but she still hoped for an explanation that would somehow preserve her faith in the loyalty of her fellow guards. Hartley's confession revealed the full scope of his betrayal, including his role in providing intelligence that had facilitated the previous attacks on royal residences. His motivations were complex, involving financial pressures, ideological manipulation, and gradual corruption that had started with seemingly innocent requests for general information and escalated over several years. The immediate crisis involved preventing Hartley from completing his final assignment, providing real-time intelligence to facilitate a direct attack on the royal family during their Christmas gathering. Catherine realized that she was not just dealing with a security breach but with an active assassination plot that could succeed within hours if not stopped immediately. The arrest of Hartley had to be conducted with absolute secrecy to prevent him from warning his handlers or triggering emergency protocols that might accelerate the attack timeline. Catherine found herself personally responsible for detaining a colleague she had trusted and worked alongside for years, using her authority and training to neutralize a threat from within her own ranks. The discovery of Hartley's betrayal triggered a complete review of security protocols and personnel screening procedures throughout the Royal Protection Services. Catherine found herself at the center of reforms designed to prevent similar infiltrations while maintaining the trust and cooperation that effective protection required. The psychological impact of the Hartley case extended far beyond the immediate participants. Every member of the Royal Protection Services had to confront the possibility that their closest colleagues might not be trustworthy, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and uncertainty that threatened to undermine the unit cohesion that was essential to effective security work. Catherine's handling of the investigation and Hartley's arrest earned her recognition as one of the most capable and trusted officers in the entire service. Her ability to maintain her professional standards while investigating her own colleagues demonstrated a level of integrity and dedication that became a model for future counterintelligence operations. The Queen's personal response to the Hartley incident reflected her deep understanding of the challenges faced by those charged with protecting her family. In a private meeting with Catherine, she acknowledged the difficulty of the investigation and expressed her appreciation for the professionalism and discretion that had prevented a potential tragedy. The reforms implemented after the Hartley case included enhanced psychological screening, more frequent background reviews, and improved monitoring systems designed to detect potential insider threats before they could cause damage. Catherine played a key role in developing these new procedures, drawing on her experience to create safeguards that would protect both the royal family and the integrity of the protection services. The decade of challenges faced by the Royal Guards, from Marcus Thompson's confrontation with the assassin at Buckingham Palace through Catherine Reynolds' investigation of the insider threat, had transformed the nature of royal protection work. The traditional model of ceremonial guards with military training had evolved into a sophisticated security apparatus capable of dealing with international terrorism, state-sponsored threats, and the complex challenges of protecting public figures in an increasingly dangerous world. The legacy of these dramatic incidents extended far beyond the immediate participants. Each crisis had contributed to the development of more effective protection protocols, better training programs, and stronger cooperation between military and civilian security agencies. The courage and professionalism displayed by guards like Marcus, Elizabeth, Michael, and Catherine had not only protected the royal family but had helped define new standards of excellence for protection services worldwide. The personal costs of this service were significant, with each officer carrying psychological scars from their experiences while finding satisfaction in knowing they had fulfilled their oath to protect the crown. Their stories became part of the oral tradition of the Guards, passed down to new generations as examples of the dedication and sacrifice required to maintain the security of the monarchy. The transformation of royal protection during this period reflected broader changes in the nature of security threats and the evolution of protective services to meet new challenges. The Guards had proven that traditional values of courage, loyalty, and duty could be combined with modern tactical thinking and technology to create effective defenses against sophisticated contemporary threats.